Welcome, dear listeners, to Miss Marple, Blood on the Moonlit Clocktower, a Miss Marple killer mystery. Settle into your favorite armchair with a cup of tea as we journey to the quaint village of St. Mary Mead in the 1950s. Join the sharp-witted Miss Jane Marple as she unravels a puzzling murder under the silvery glow of the moon. This cozy tale of intrigue and deduction is perfect for a relaxing evening. Our story unfolds over 10 chapters, each about 8 to 10 minutes when narrated. For easy navigation, chapter timestamps are included. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. The Shadow of the Clocktower. In the heart of the English countryside, nestled amid rolling hills dotted with ancient oaks and hedgerows alive with the chatter of blackbirds, lay the village of St. Mary Mead. It was the sort of place where time seemed to linger, like the last sip of a well-brewed pot of Darjeeling, unhurried, comforting, and steeped in the quiet rhythms of rural life. The year was 1952, and though the world beyond the village boundaries still bore the faint scars of war, in St. Mary Mead, one might almost forget such troubles. The thatched roofs of the cottages gleamed golden under the autumn sun, their chimneys puffing lazy curls of wood smoke that mingled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the sweet tang of apples ripening in the orchards. The high street, lined with a modest row of shops, a greengrocer's with baskets overflowing in vibrant hues, a post office where gossip flowed as freely as the stamps, and the ever-popular tea shop, presided over by the plump and perpetually cheerful Mrs. Ada Potts, served as the village's beating heart. At the very center of this idyllic tableau stood the clock tower, a sturdy edifice of weathered gray stone that had watched over St. Mary Mead for 3 centuries. Erected in the reign of Queen Anne, it rose some 80 feet into the sky, its 4 clock faces gazing out like stern but benevolent guardians. The hands on each face were wrought in ornate black iron, ticking away the hours with a reliability that bordered on the sacred. Cobblestones to silver, and the thatched roofs to shimmering waves. The air was crisp, carrying the faint chill of approaching frost, laced with the distant lowing of cattle from Farmer Giles's fields, and the rustle of leaves in the poplars that flanked the high street. Most folk had retired to their hearths, where fires crackled merrily, and wireless sets murmured the evening news from far-off London. In the Blue Boar Inn, a handful of regulars nursed their pints, debating the merits of the latest cricket match, while in the cottages, mothers tucked children into beds warmed by hot water bottles, and husbands dozed over the evening paper. Miss Jane Marple, that epitome of genteel spinsterhood, sat in her snug parlor at Danvers House, just off the high street. At 70-something, though she never specified the exact figure, preferring to let others assume she was of an age, Miss Marple was a figure as familiar to St. Mary Mead as the clock tower itself. Small and slight, with a mop of soft white hair pinned neatly under a lace cap, she possessed the unassuming air of one who had long since faded into the background of village life. Her cheeks were rosy from the fire's glow, her hands busy with a pair of ivory knitting needles that clicked rhythmically as she worked on a complicated cable-stitch shawl. A pair of steel-rimmed spectacles perched on the bridge of her nose, magnifying eyes that were sharp as a hawk's, eyes that missed nothing, from the frayed cuff of a curate's shirt to the flicker of guilt in a neighbor's glance. Miss Marple had no formal title, no badge of office, yet her reputation as an amateur detective preceded her like a gentle breeze preceding a summer storm. "People are very much alike everywhere," she often said, her voice soft and precise, with the faintest hint of a smile. A vicar in St. Mary Mead is not so different from one in Bermuda when it comes to human failings. On this particular evening, her companion was not a visitor but her devoted nephew, Raymond West, a novelist of some renown who had motored down from London for a weekend's respite. He lounged in the armchair opposite, his long legs stretched toward the flames. Sort. The one who smiles too brightly at the church social, or forgets to return a borrowed book. It's the little inconsistencies that betray them, you know. Like Mrs. Price Ridley last summer with her Tales of the Continent. One doesn't pick up a Parisian accent from a holiday in Margate. Raymond chuckled, shaking his head. You see mysteries in a teacup, Aunt. But tell me, what's the latest scandal in our little Eden here? Has old Sir Reginald Hawthorne been at his miserly tricks again? At the mention of Sir Reginald, Miss Marple's expression grew thoughtful. Sir Reginald was the village's unofficial squire, a widower in his late 60s whose family had held the Hawthorne estate for generations. Tall and gaunt, with a hawkish nose and a perpetual scowl that spoke of digestive troubles and disappointed ambitions, he owned half the farmland surrounding St. Mary Mead, as well as the mill by the brook and several tenanted cottages. His wealth was considerable, amassed through shrewd investments in the war years, but his generosity was as sparse as thistles in a hayfield. Whispers abounded of evictions for late rent, of withheld repairs on the Clocktower, which he part-funded as lord of the manor, and of a recent quarrel with the vicar over the church roof. Yet Sir Reginald had his admirers, the younger set, who envied his trips to London and his collection of fine wines, and his niece Lydia, who stood to inherit it all upon his demise. Miss Marple had observed him often from her garden gate, noting the way he strode about with a gold pocket watch chained to his waistcoat, ticking away like a metronome of his own self-importance. Before she could reply, a sound rent the night. A scream, sharp and piercing, that sliced through the quiet like a knife through butter. It came from the direction of the village square, echoing off the stone walls of the clock tower, and carrying on the still air all the way to Danvers' house. Miss Marple's needles stilled instantly, her head tilting like a bird's. Raymond bolted upright, his pipe tumbling forgotten to the rug. Slippers, and a cluster of farm hands from the edge of the village, their faces etched with alarm. The square was a tableau of chaos under the moon's unblinking eye. At the base of the clock tower, where the shadows pooled deepest, against the stone plinth, lay the crumpled form of Sir Reginald Hawthorne. He was sprawled on his back amid the cobblestones, one arm flung out as if in supplication, the other clutching at his waistcoat where the gold chain of his pocket watch glinted mockingly. A dark pool spread beneath his head, staining the stones of viscous crimson that caught the moonlight like spilled ink under lamplight. His face, usually so florid and furrowed, was slack and pale, the eyes staring sightlessly at the tower above. Beside him, half tucked into the folds of his evening coat, lay the shattered remnants of his pocket watch, its crystal face cracked, the hands frozen eternally at midnight, though the village clock, when it deigned to chime, had struck but 10 some minutes prior. The scream's source was young Bessie, the barmaid from the Blue Boar, who knelt a few paces away, her apron twisted in her hands, her face buried in her skirts as sobs racked her frame. I was coming back from the pub," she gasped to no one in particular, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. Cutting through the square, Saw him lying there. Oh God, it's Sir Reginald. The gathering crowd murmured in shock, a ripple of horror spreading like ripples on a pond. Murder, someone whispered, and the word hung in the air, heavy as fog. Constable Evans, a fresh-faced lad of 20 scarcely out of training at the county station, pushed through with more enthusiasm than authority, his helmet askew. Stand back, everyone. This here's a crime scene now. No touchin' nothin'. He fumbled for his whistle, blowing a shrill blast that set dogs barking in distant farms. Miss Marple, arriving at the fringes of the throng with Raymond at her side, surveyed the scene with the quiet absorption of one clocktower of all places, where so many eyes might have seen. Though in moonlight, shadows play tricks, don't they? One person's silhouette might be another's phantom. Raymond, paling at the sight, gripped her elbow. Aunt Jane, this is ghastly. Struck down like that? With a wrench? It must be a robbery gone wrong. The watch chain's empty. Perhaps, Miss Marple replied mildly, her eyes flicking to the empty fob where the watch should have dangled. But robbers don't often smash the very thing they seek to steal. And look there, the clock's hands haven't moved since noon today. Rusty mechanism, poor dear. Sir Reginald promised the vicar funds for it last month, but... She trailed off, her mind already weaving threads of possibility. As the constable barked orders and a runner was dispatched to summon the inspector from Market Basing, the villagers milled about, their faces a mosaic of fear and speculation. Mrs. Potts dabbed at her eyes with her apron. He was a hard man, Sir Reginald, but no one deserves this. Who'd do such a thing? That niece of his up from London, always schemin'. Mr. Higgs, the postmaster, shook his head. Or the innkeep Finch owed him a packet from cards. I posted the letters myself. Whispers turned to the gardener, old Tom Wilkins, who shuffled forward, his cap twisting in gnarled hands. I locked up the estate at dusk, ma'am. Sir Reginald said he was headin' to the tower for a bit of stargazin'. Moon's full tonight, perfect for it. Miss Marple listened, her expression one of sympathetic concern, but inwardly, her thoughts raced like shuttles on a loom. Motives, she knew, were as plentiful in St. Mary Mead as dahlias in July. Sir Reginald's recent garden party, held just a fortnight past under these very moonbeams, had been a glittering affair. Lanterns strung like fireflies, a string quartet from the county playing waltzes on the green. Invitations had been selective, favoring the gentry over the common folk. But Miss Marple had glimpsed it all from her upstairs window, noting the strained smiles and sidelong glances as the body was respectfully covered and the crowd dispersed into the chill night. Miss Marple turned back toward Danvers' house, her arm linked now with Raymond's for support. The clock tower loomed behind them, silent and sentinel, its frozen hands a mocking riddle. The village slept uneasily that night, but for Miss Marple sleep would come later. First, there were patterns to ponder, suspects to consider, and a mystery to unravel, one that would bind St. Mary Mead in threads of suspicion until the dawn of truth. Chapter 2. Whispers Among the Villagers. The dawn broke over St. Mary Mead with a reluctance befitting a village in mourning, the sun rising like a hesitant guest at a somber tea party. Pale fingers of light crept across the dew-kissed meadows, gilding the hedgerows and coaxing reluctant birdsong from the elms that bordered the high street. The air held a crisp edge, sharp with the scent of damp earth and the faint, acrid tang of last night's lanterns, now extinguished and stacked like weary sentinels outside the Blue Boar. Smoke rose in thin, mournful plumes from cottage chimneys, where housewives kindled their fires and set kettles to boil, their movements subdued as if the very rhythm of the village had been set askew by the night's grim discovery. The clock tower, that steadfast sentinel, stood unchanged in the square, its hands still frozen at midday, a silent accusation amid the fluttering police tape that Constable Evans had strung with more zeal than finesse. A few early risers paused to stare, crossing themselves furtively or murmuring prayers before hurrying on to their chores. In St. Mary Mead, death was no stranger. Old age claimed its toll in the thatched homes and the almshouse. But murder, that was a shadow cast from another world, one of garish headlines and wireless broadcasts, not the gentle weave of village life. Miss Jane Marple stirred in her feather bed at Danvers' house, the first rays filtering through lace curtains to dance upon the wallpaper, patterned with climbing roses. She had slept little, her mind a quiet loom threading the unyielding as the roots of the ancient yew in the churchyard. "Mornin', miss," she said, her voice pitched low out of deference to the tragedy. "Porridge with honey, as you like, and a pot of tea steeping. Mr. Raymond's still snoring upstairs, poor lamb, white as milk when he came in last night." Miss Marple smiled faintly, settling into her Windsor chair by the window that overlooked the herb garden. "Thank you, Emily. And a slice of your seed cake, if you please. One must keep one's strength for the day ahead." As she spooned the steaming porridge, creamy oats flecked with golden raisins and drizzled with heather honey from the apiary at the edge of the village, her thoughts drifted to Raymond. He had tossed fitfully in the guest room, muttering of plot twists and shadowy figures, his novelist's imagination inflamed by the real-life drama. But Miss Marple knew better than to indulge such flights. Truth, in her experience, lurked not in Gothic spires, but in the everyday exchanges of a tea shop or a church porch. Breakfast dispatched with economical grace, she penned a brief note to Inspector Craddock, offering her observations without presumption, for she knew his pride would brook no outright interference, and dispatched Emily with it to the temporary incident room at the vicarage. Then, wrapping herself in a tweed coat of muted greens and browns, and pinning a brooch shaped like a thistle to her lapel, Miss Marple set forth for the high street. The village was stirring now. The milkman rattled his cart along the lanes, bottles clinking like muffled bells. The baker, Mr. Treadwell, hauled trays of crusty loaves from his oven, their yeasty aroma a balm against the chill. And schoolchildren in starched pinafores scampered toward the red brick academy, their games hushed by teachers' stern glances. Yet beneath the routine hummed an undercurrent of whispers, like the rustle of dry leaves before a gale, speculation about Sir Reginald's end, and who among them might harbor the darkness to bring it about. Her destination was the tea shop, that unassuming haven wedged between the haberdashery and the ironmongers, its bow-fronted window displaying trays of ice was tempered. As Miss Marple pushed open the door, the bell tinkling softly like a sigh, she found Mrs. Potts wiping a counter with unnecessary vigor, her eyes red-rimmed from a night of fretting. "Ah, Miss Marple, love," Mrs. Potts greeted, bustling forward with a teapot in hand. Come in, come in. Don't stand on ceremony. A table by the window? Best for watching the comings and goings, and Lord knows there'll be plenty today." She guided Miss Marple to a nook upholstered in faded chintz, where a small fire crackled in the grate, chasing away the autumn nip. The shop was half full. Two elderly ladies from the sewing circle huddled over their Darjeeling, heads bent like conspirators. A farm wife in a woolen shawl nursed a mug of builder's tea, and at the corner table, The postmaster, Mr. Higgs, shuffled a deck of cards, his mustache twitching with nervous energy. "A pot of Earl Grey, if you please, Mrs. Potts. And perhaps a plate of your cheese scones," Miss Marple replied, settling her handbag on the chair beside her with the care of one placing a fragile ornament. "Two, actually. The day calls for sustenance." As Mrs. Potts nodded and retreated to the kitchen, clucking sympathetically, Miss Marple arranged her coat and let her gaze wander. The tea shop was a nexus of village intelligence, its steamed windows fogged with the breath of gossip, its table scarred from years of elbows leaning in for confidences. Here, motives were sifted like tea leaves, and alibis brewed stronger than the pot itself. Mrs. Potts returned with a laden tray, setting down the bone china pot, its spout etched with forget-me-nots, and a trio of scones still warm from the oven, split and buttered, with a dollop of clotted cream and strawberry preserve on the side. "There now, miss. And mind you, no charge today. 'Tis the least I can do with all this upset. Sir Reginald was in only last Tuesday, grumbling about the price of biscuits, said they were highway robbery. As if he didn't own half the county. Proper since Easter. Vicar wanted funds for an overhaul. A matter of spiritual resonance, he calls it. But Sir Reginald balked, said the tower was village frippery, and poured the money into that fancy garden party instead. I served the canapés myself, deviled eggs and salmon vol au vents, fancy as you please. Vicar stormed off early, red as a beet, muttering about heathen vanities. Miss Marple nodded, nibbling a scone whose flaky crust yielded to a savory heart of cheddar and herbs. The Reverend Thorne is a man of principles, to be sure, stern but not without charity. I recall him organizing the Harvest Festival last year, such a lovely spread of marrows and chutneys. Yet even as she spoke, her mind catalogued the details. The vicar's long fingers, stained faintly with ink from sermon writing. His habit of pacing the churchyard at dusk, Bible in hand, under the tower's watchful eye. A man who valued time's sanctity might resent its desecration, especially if tied to a grudge. As if summoned by the thought, the tea shop door swung open with a chime, admitting a gust of cool air and the tall, angular figure of Vicar Elias Thorne himself. He was a man in his mid-50s, gaunt as a winter branch, with a face carved from pale granite, high cheekbones, a nose like a Roman aquiline, and eyes of faded blue that peered over wire-rimmed spectacles with the intensity of a judge pronouncing sentence. His clerical collar was crisp as new-fallen snow, his black waistcoat buttoned to the throat, and in his hand he clutched a worn leather breviary, its pages thumbed from fervent use. The air about him seemed to tighten, as if his very presence demanded reverence, and the sewing circle ladies straightened instinctively, their chatter falling to a hush. "Vicar!" Mrs. Potts exclaimed, recovering her poise and waving him to a table. "Tea? Or perhaps a nice digestive biscuit to settle the nerves?" "Chamomile, if you have it, Mrs. Potts. Strong mind," he replied, his voice a measured baritone, resonant as the church organ on Sundays. He nodded curtly to Miss Marple, repair funds to finance his dissipations. The garden party, for instance, lanterns and champagne under the moon, while the tower rusts. I remonstrated with him that very evening in the square. He laughed, and said, "Bells are for fools who fear the dark, Thorne." Words I shan't soon forget. His fingers drummed the breviary's cover, a subtle rhythm betraying agitation, and Miss Marple noted a faint smudge on his cuff, dark, oily, like machine grease. not the mark of a study-bound cleric, but of one who tinkered in shadows. Before she could pursue the thread, the door tinkled again, ushering in a contrast as stark as summer to winter. Dr. Amelia Croft, the village's sole physician. She was a woman of 40-odd, compact and vigorous, with short-cropped hair the color of polished chestnuts, and a brisk stride that spoke of wards walked and fevers broken. Her tweed skirt and sensible brogues were practical as her bedside manner, and her face, square-jawed, with keen hazel eyes behind horn-rimmed glasses, held the no-nonsense resolve of one who mended bodies, and occasionally souls. A black medical bag swung from her arm, its leather scuffed from house calls, and she carried the faint scent of carbolic soap and lavender water. "Dr. Croft," Mrs. Potts called, already reaching for a fresh pot. "The usual? Black? No milk?" "Indeed, and make it strong. I've a morning of consultations ahead, what with the shock rippling through." The doctor slid into a stool at the counter, nodding to the vicar with cool civility, and to Miss Marple with warmer regard. "Morning, Miss Marple. You've the look of one who's already piecing it together. Seen you at scenes like this before. Sharp as a scalpel you are." Miss Marple demurred with a flutter of her hand. "Merely observing, doctor. One picks up trifles in a place like this. And you? Treating for nerves, I imagine." Croft's laugh was short, like a cough. "Nerves? Try his Finch over at the inn. Burly as a bullock, that one, with a smile like a fox in cream. But debts, oh, the debts. Cards at the Blue Boar, horses at Ascot Proxies. Sir Reginald fronted him alone last spring, and when it came due, fireworks. I heard 'em through the wall. 'Pay up or I'll have the bailiffs.' Finch swore he'd settle, but eyes like saucers when the constable asked his whereabouts last night." As if on cue, the door admitted Mr. Harold Finch himself, a mountain of a man in his late 40s, with a barreled chest straining his checked waistcoat, and a mop of sandy hair receding like a tide. His face was ruddy, his grin perpetual, a publican's armor against lean nights, and he moved with the easy swagger of one who poured pints and pulled teeth with equal nonchalance. "Ladies! Vicar!" he boomed, clapping Thorne on the shoulder with enough force to elicit a wince. "Tea all round? Mrs. Potts, you're a vision. 2 sugars in mine, and a slice of that ginger cake if it's not all gone to the widow's." Settling at a table near the fire, Finch lit a woodbine, the smoke wreathing his head like a dubious halo. "Nasty goings-on, eh? Sir Reginald was a regular. Guinness and a chaser most evenings. We had words last night, over a trifling sum from the tables. But murder, not my style. I was pullin' pints till closin'. Ask him, Bessie." His laugh boomed, but Miss Marple caught the flicker in his eye, the way his fingers drummed the table. Nerves, or the ghost of a grudge? The tea shop's bell rang once more, heralding a flurry of activity as the morning deepened. Young Lydia Beaumont swept in like a London fog, slender, ethereal in a mink-trimmed coat and heels that clicked imperiously on the floorboards. Sir Reginald's niece was 28, with porcelain skin, raven hair coiled in elegant waves, and eyes of stormy gray that could charm or chill with equal facility. She had arrived by the evening train from the capital, where she pursued artistic endeavors, vague enough to fuel village No reason. Said he was lazy. But it was the union talk, mark me. Unpaid wages piling up, and Sir Reginald laughing from his manner. Moonlight shows true colors, it does. As the clock on the wall, a cheerful cottage timepiece, unlike its frozen cousin, struck 11, Miss Marple drained her cup, the dregs forming a leaf pattern she might have read like tea leaves, had she such superstitions. The suspects paraded before her like players on a stage. The principled vicar with his oily cuff, the pragmatic doctor and her telltale wrench, the indebted innkeeper's forced bonhomie, the poised heiress's veiled avarice, the gardener's quiet bitterness. Motives swirled like cream in tea: money, pride, retribution. Each believable, each laced with the ordinary frailties of village life. Gathering her things, Miss Marple rose, bestowing smiles and nods like benedictions. "A fine morning for truths to emerge, don't you think?" she said to Mrs. Potts, who nodded vigorously. Stepping into the street, where the sun now warmed the cobblestones and the village resumed its gentle hum, Miss Marple paused by the clock tower's shadow. People, she reflected, adjusting her brooch, are much like her knitting patterns, full of twists that seemed simple at first glance, but revealed their secrets only under patient scrutiny. The day was young, and the whispers just beginning. Chapter 3. Tea and Suspicions. The midday sun climbed higher over St. Mary Mead, casting a benevolent warmth that softened the edges of the morning's chill and coaxed a faint haze from the river meadows beyond the village. The high street, now fully awake, pulsed with the unhurried commerce of rural England. Carts laden with cabbages and cauliflowers rumbled toward the greengrocers, their wheels singing on the macadam. A gaggle of housewives in floral aprons bartered over bolts of cotton at the haberdashery, their laughter a counterpoint to the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. And from the schoolhouse came the muffled drone of a geography lesson, punctuated by the occasional squeak of she approached, flanked by borders of lavender and rosemary that released their pungent aromas with each step, a soothing balm for the spirit, or so the vicar often claimed in his sermons on Providence. An invitation had arrived by Emily's hand that morning, penned in Thorne's precise copper plate. "Tea at 12:30, Miss Marple. A word on parish matters, and perhaps this lamentable affair." She had accepted with a note of her own suggesting that a cup of tea clarifies the mind as much as prayer does the soul. Rapping the brass knocker shaped like a lion's head, she waited, her handbag clutched like a talisman. The door opened to reveal not the vicar but his housekeeper, Mrs. Grimshaw, a wiry woman of indeterminate age with a face like weathered parchment and eyes that missed little more than Miss Marple's own. "Miss Marple, ma'am. He's expectin' you in the study. Mind the cat. Mr. Whiskers has a temper like the devil on a wet Sunday." She led the way through a hall papered in faded William Morris patterns, past a grandfather clock that ticked with solemn authority, and into a book-lined sanctum where the air smelled of beeswax polish, old vellum, and the faint musty undertone of drying ink. The room was a testament to clerical devotion. Shelves groaned under folios of theology and histories of ecclesiastical architecture. A mahogany desk bore stacks of parish registers, and on the mantelpiece sat a brass astrolabe, its dials catching the light like stars trapped in metal. Vicar Elias Thorne rose from a wing-back chair by the hearth, where a modest fire popped and hissed, extending a hand that was cool and dry as autumn leaves. "Miss Marple, a pleasure amid sorrow," he intoned, gesturing her to the opposite chair with a bow that was almost courtly. "Mrs. Grimshaw, tea for two. Lapsang souchong, if you please, and those almond biscuits the late Lady Hawthorne favored. As the housekeeper retreated with a curtsy, Thorne settled back. His black relight his pipe, a carved meerschaum bowl, shaped like a bishop's mitre, its stem worn smooth from years of contemplation. The flame illuminated the smudge anew, not mere ink, but a viscous streak, dark and metallic, as if from gears long neglected. Poignant. A desecration, Miss Marple. Those bells have summoned souls to worship since the days of the Restoration. Steady as the tides, resonant as judgment. Yet Sir Reginald deemed them expendable. Superstition for the masses, he called them at the vestry meeting. Withheld the funds for repairs, diverting them to frivolities. The garden party, lanterns strung like pagan baubles, champagne flowing while the tower's heart rusted. I pleaded with him there, under the moon's false glow. He dismissed me with a sneer. Pray for your bells, Thorne. I'll pray for my prophets. Words that echo now, like a curse. His voice rose, then fell, the pipe smoke wreathing his head in a hazy nimbus. Mrs. Grimshaw returned then, bearing a silver tray laden with the essentials, a Georgian teapot etched with pastoral scenes, cups of spode porcelain thin as eggshell, a tiered stand of almond biscuits dusted with sugar like fresh snow, and a small pot of quince preserve, its amber hue glowing like captured sunlight. She poured with practiced efficiency, the tea's smoky aroma filling the room, a robust brew that promised fortitude. Will that be all, Vicar? The curates do it too for evensong prep. That will be all, Grimshaw. And see to the sexton. Tell him the tower's off limits till the police say otherwise. As the door clicked shut, Thorne handed Miss Marple her cup, his fingers brushing hers. Steady now, but for that lingering tremor. You understand, of course, the spiritual dimension. Time is God's domain. To mock it with a broken clock. Unforgivable. I spent the evening foolishness. He paused, pipe clenched between teeth. You, with your insights. Any light to cast? The inspector eyes me askance, for the quarrel. Light comes from many angles, Vicar, like the sun through stained glass, she replied mildly, her tea cooling untouched. But motives are mirrors, reflecting our own frailties, greed perhaps, or wounded pride. One must listen to the echoes. Rising with regret, the biscuits were divine. She extended her thanks, promising a contribution to the Bell Fund. As she departed, the vicar's voice followed her into the hall. Pray for discernment, Miss Marple. The truth tolls like a bell, eventually. The afternoon waned toward tea o'clock as Miss Marple proceeded to Dr. Amelia Croft's cottage, a thatched dwelling on the lane's quieter bend, where honeysuckle clambered over the porch like an eager suitor, and the front garden boasted orderly ranks of foxgloves and feverfew, remedies as much as ornament. The doctor's brass plate gleamed beside the door. Amelia Croft, M.B., B.S., by appointment. And inside, the waiting room smelled of iodine and dried herbs, its walls hung with anatomical charts and a framed diploma from Edinburgh. Croft herself emerged from her consulting room at Miss Marple's knock, wiping her hands on a linen towel. Her sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms freckled and strong from years of suturing and splinting. Miss Marple, capital timing. Just seen off old Mrs. Archer's lumbago. Come through, tea in the kitchen. None of this formal guff. The doctor led her to a snug rear room, flagstoned and beamed, where a Rayburn stove radiated heat and a deal table bore the scars of hasty meals. Croft was the antithesis of fussy domesticity. Her hair, cropped practical, escaped in defiant wisps. Her skirt, a serviceable wool, bore a faint ink stain, and her manner was brisk as a nor'wester, yet laced with a dry wit that endeared her to the ailing. She set the kettle whistling on the hob, rummage accusation. But the real rub was the clinic. I need space. A proper dispensary for the farm lad's strains, the mother's fevers. His land, prime for it, flat, near the brook. Pestered him monthly. He dithered, then flat out refused at the party. My estate's no almshouse, he barked, spilling claret down my front. I left in a temper, could have wrung his neck. A bark of laughter escaped her, self-deprecating. Figuratively, mind. Alibis solid. Delivered twins at Farmer Giles's till midnight. As Croft gestured expansively, her medical bag left open on the table, gaped like a Pandora's box, stethoscope coiled like a serpent, vials of morphine glinting, and nestled amid the clutter a wrench, compact, iron-headed, its handle wrapped in frayed leather. The head bore faint scratches, and Miss Marple's pulse quickened imperceptibly. It matched the murder tool's silhouette, down to the maker's stamp half effaced by use. Handy for? She inquired lightly, nodding toward it. Plumbing woes, this old cottage leaks like a sieve. Croft replied without hesitation, snapping the bag shut. Fixed the tap last week. Sir Reginald's lot? He'd sooner pay a handyman than lift a finger himself. Her grin was wolfish, revealing a gold molar from a long-ago mishap. They chatted then of village ailments, the postman's rheumatism, the baker's chilblains, over a plate of arrowroot biscuits, crisp and unadorned. Croft's candor was a tonic, but Miss Marple noted the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked to the window overlooking the clocktower's distant spire. A woman of science, yet haunted by human shadows. Bidding farewell with promises of gooseberry cordial for Emily's cough, Miss Marple turned her steps toward the Blue Boar Inn, a timber-framed hostelry on the square's edge, its sign, a painted boar rampant, swaying gently in the breeze. The taproom smelled of hops and hearth smoke. Its low beams, scarred from sensual, faltered at the edges, and Miss Marple caught the tremor in his pore, the way his eyes darted to the door as if expecting the inspector's knock. Debts are heavy yokes, Mr. Finch, she observed, crumbling a scone whose warmth evoked childhood treats. Yet pubs are sanctuaries, alibis etched in sawdust. Bessie vouches for you. Till the bells tolled 10, aye, and after, sweeping up with the wife. He leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial rumble. But between you and the gatepost, that niece of his, Lydia, slippery as an eel. Saw her cozying up at the party, all doe eyes and flattery. Inheritance fever, mark me. Miss Marple nodded, filing the warmth of the butter, the inn's deceptive coziness, places where truths slipped out with the ale. Her final errand took her to Hawthorne Manor, a sprawling Tudor pile on the village's outskirts, its ivy-clad walls enclosing lawns manicured like billiard cloths. Lydia Beaumont received her in the morning room, a chamber of chintz sofas and Waterford crystal that glittered like frozen tears. The young woman was a vision of poised grief, black crepe gown hugging her slender form, pearls at her throat, and hair pinned in a chignon that begged for dishevelment. "Aunt Jane, do sit. Tea?" The butlers laid it out, Darjeeling, with lemon. Her voice was modulated, a London lilt softened for the provinces, but her hands, ringed with sapphires, twisted a handkerchief untouched by damp. Miss Marple accepted the cup, its saucer clinking softly as she settled amid cushions embroidered with huntsmen and hounds. "My sympathies, child. Your uncle, a pillar in his way." Lydia's gray eyes, storm cloud cool, met hers steadily. "Pillar? More like a thorn bush, prickly, possessive. But the will, he altered it last month, you know. Everything, the estate, the London flat, the shares, to me. Blood's thicker," he grumbled, "after that row with Cousin Edmund. I needed it on resentment. Hard. Sacked my boy Will, good lad, steady, over a bent trellis. Laziness, he called it, but it was the whispers about wages. Unpaid, month on month. I told him straight, moonlight shows the black hearts, sir. He laughed, and threatened the workhouse. Last night, I locked the potting shed at dusk, home to my cottage pie. But secrets, they bloom in the dark. His voice trailed to a mutter, shears clicking like false teeth. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the manor's facade in amber, Miss Marple retraced her steps to Danvers House, the village settling into twilight's hush. The encounters replayed in her mind like scenes from a lantern slideshow. Thorne's tremor and oil, Croft's wrench and candor, Finch's bluster, Lydia's polish, Tom's bitterness. Clues, like stitches in a shawl, loose threads to pull, patterns emerging. Tea, she reflected, unlocking her garden gate, was the great leveler. In its steam rose truths, scalding and sweet. Chapter 4. The Garden Party Recollections. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across St. Mary Mead, stretching like tentative fingers toward the high street, the village seemed to exhale a collective sigh of weary speculation. The sun, now a mellow orb slung low in the western sky, filtered through the boughs of the chestnut trees that lined the lanes, dappling the pavements in mottled gold and umber. Leaves, burnished to copper by the touch of early frost, drifted lazily earthward, carpeting the gutters in a rustling tapestry that muffled the clip-clop of hooves from the dairy farm on the hill. The air carried the mingled scents of harvest, damp hay from the ricks in Farmer Giles's fields, the smoky tang of bonfires where garden refuse smoldered in neat piles, and the ever-present undertone of baking bread from Treadwell's oven. A steadfast reminder that life, for all its perturbations, demanded sustenance. Yet beneath this pastoral veneer hummed the insistent drone of intrigue, lemon peel, and settled into her favorite armchair by the bow window. The room was a sanctuary of ordered comforts. The turkey carpet, faded to soft hues of crimson and azure, muffled her slippers. Shelves of well-thumbed novels by Trollope and Austen flanked the fireplace, where embers glowed like banked secrets, and on the occasional table sat a vase of late-blooming Michaelmas daisies, their petals a defiant violet against the encroaching dusk. Yet even here, amid the familiar, the puzzle tugged at her. Sir Reginald's death not an isolated thunderclap, but the culmination of storm clouds long gathering. Perhaps most palpably at that ill-fated garden party a fortnight past. The party. Miss Marple had not been bidden to it. Sir Reginald's guest list favored the county's brighter sparks over the high street curiosities, as Lydia had once jested. But proximity had afforded her a ringside view. From her upstairs casement she had observed the revels unfolding on the green adjacent to the clocktower. Lanterns strung like luminous pearls along the hawthorn hedges, casting pools of amber light that danced with the shadows of waltzing couples. Trestle tables groaning under silver chafing dishes of roast pheasant and curried shrimp, flanked by pyramids of strawberries glistening with dew. And a string quartet from Market Basing, their bows coaxing Mendelssohn from violins that gleamed like polished chestnuts. The moon had been near full then, too, a silver sickle rising to bathe the scene in an ethereal glow that turned faces to porcelain masks and turned the ordinary into something almost enchanted. Yet enchantment, Miss Marple reflected, sipping her tea, often veiled the thorns beneath. A soft rap at the door heralded Emily, bearing a basket of laundry fresh from the mangle, her apron dusted with starch. Mrs. Potts sends word. Fresh gossip at the tea shop if you're inclined. Says it's hotter than a scone from the oven about that party. And Inspector Craddock's been sniffing round the manor, asking after jewels or some such. Miss Marple's eyes brightened, though patrons. The sewing circle ladies, their needles idle in laps as they leaned in over pots of Indian chai. A pair of farm wives sharing a platter of seed cake, crumbs scattering like confetti. And at the window table a lone figure in clerical black. Young Curate Hargreaves, Vicar Thorne's assistant, nursing a milkless coffee with the air of one out of his depth. Mrs. Potts spotted Miss Marple through the fogged glass and bustled forward, wiping floury hands on her pinny. Miss Marple, love, knew you'd pop in. Table by the fire, and a pot of your favorite, a Assam, strong as a navvy's handshake, with those lavender shortbreads fresh out. Assam it is, Mrs. Potts, and shortbreads with my thanks, Miss Marple replied, divesting her cape and settling into the nook where the flames licked at applewood logs, sending sparks upward like fleeting stars. The air was redolent of cinnamon and cloves from a simmering mulled cordial in the corner, mingling with the earthy depth of the tea as Mrs. Potts poured with theatrical flourish. A plate of shortbreads followed, delicate rounds pale as moonlight, crisp-edged and studded with violet petals that lent a floral whisper to each bite. Miss Marple savored one, the buttery crumble yielding to a subtle herbal note, as her hostess drew up a stool, her voice dropping to the confidential timbre reserved for true intimates. Now then, miss, that garden party. The whole village is chewing it over like gristle on Sunday roast. Sir Reginald spared no expense. Caterers from London, fireworks at midnight. But under it all, tensions thick as clotted cream. I was there myself, serving the highbrows, apron and all, but they tipped handsome. Saw it all unfold clear as day. Or night, rather. Moon so bright you could have read a scandal sheet by it. Miss Marple leaned forward, cup cradled in hands that betrayed no tremor. Do go on, Mrs. Potts. Parties are like gardens, blooming on the surface, but roots run deep and tangled. What thorns thunderous, breviary clutched like a shield. Gone before the vol au vents were half eaten. Miss Marple nodded, her mind's eye reconstructing the scene. Thorne's angular frame cutting through the throng, the moon silvering his clerical collar to steel. A principled stand, no doubt. And the others? Tempers in the moonlight often flare brighter. Oh, aye, Dr. Croft next. She was there with the medical set from Basingstoke, all talk of sanatoriums and vaccines. But Sir Reginald corners her by the punch bowl. That clinic of yours, Croft, dream on. My land's for grazing, not gimcrack do-goodery. She colors up fierce, hazel eyes flashing, and spills her claret deliberate-like down his sleeve. Grazing for your ego, more like, she hisses, low but venomous. Slips away soon after, muttering to a chaperone about a sudden house call. Vanished into the shadows toward the brook path. Odd that, with no patience in sight. The image coalesced for Miss Marple. Croft's compact vigor propelling her from the lights, medical bag swinging like a pendulum. A woman of action, perhaps too hasty in her exits. And Mr. Finch? I hear he played quartermaster to the revels. Mrs. Potts chuckled, a rumble like distant thunder. Quartermaster? More like ringmaster. Tray in hand, hawking gin fizzes and sly grins. But oh, the eyes on him, miss. Darting to Sir Reginald's pocket like a magpie to silver. They tangle by the dessert table, Sir Reginald waving an IOU, all crisp as banknotes. Pay up, Finch, or it's the workhouse for your brood. Innkeep goes red as beetroot, mumbles, soon, governor, soon. But you could see the steam rising. Served drinks till the fireworks popped, big Catherine wheels spelling Hawthorne in sparks. But after, slipped out for a breath of air, or so Bessie swears. Back quick as a wink, but sweaty round the gills. Miss Marple crumbled the tea's robustness, a counter to the gathering chill beyond the window. And the aftermath? No echoes in the square that night? Mrs. Potts's eyes widened, leaning in with conspiratorial relish. Echoes? Try a missing bauble, Lady Montague's emerald necklace, gone from her reticule during the waltz. Uproar at the fireworks. Sir Reginald calls for the constable. Evans, green as grass, fumbling his notebook. Fingers pointed everywhere. The gypsy caravan camped by the crossroads. Vagrants, they say, with eyes for glitter. Or the footman, young Jem, who scarpered at dawn with wages unpaid. Inspector Craddock's hot on it now, trailing that vagrant trail to the woods, poor lamb. But me? Smells like fox to feathers. No one's found the necklace, and with Sir Reginald cold. Convenient diversion, eh? A red herring, Miss Marple mused, bright and wriggling. Vagrants as scapegoats, a trope as old as the hills. Convenient indeed. Distractions multiply like rabbits in spring. But the square itself? Any impressions left? Mrs. Potts tapped her temple. Impressions? The ground was trampled to mush by heels and boots. Party's end saw folk staggering homeward. But Bessie, sweeping up at dawn, before the, you know, found a boot print by the tower plinth, deep in the mud. Man's size, ridged sole like a laborer's. Constable measured it. 8 inches, they say, but no matches yet. And Sir Reginald's watch. Shattered, hands at midnight. But the party's fireworks were at 11 sharp. Time's a slippery eel, miss. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the clock tower visible through the pane, its silhouette stark against the fading sky. The footprint, a tantalizing negative, absence as clue. The watch deliberately marred to mislead the hour. Slippery, yes, like alibis under scrutiny. One must tread carefully lest one slips into assumption. Their tete-a-tete was interrupted by the chime of the door. Rarely bows to theater. He pocketed his notes, eyes thoughtful. Theater, eh? We'll see. Evans is canvassing the green. Every boot in the village, if need be. With a nod, he departed into the gloom, the door's bell tolling like a minor dirge. As twilight deepened, painting the tea shop in hues of indigo and brass, Miss Marple finished her tea, the dregs forming arcane patterns she dismissed with a smile. Mrs. Potts cleared the table, chattering of seed cake recipes. But Miss Marple's thoughts lingered on the party, a microcosm of motives, where grudges flowered under lantern light, and the moon, impartial witness, concealed as much as it revealed. Rising, she donned her cape, the fabric whispering against her shoulders. A fine recounting, Mrs. Potts. Parties end, but their echoes, they chime on. Stepping into the evening's embrace where gas lamps flickered to life along the street like hesitant fireflies, Miss Marple paused by the clock tower's base. The police tape stirred in the wind, and in the muddied earth nearby, she fancied she discerned the ghost of that footprint, ridged, enigmatic, pointing nowhere yet everywhere. The vagrant lead would fizzle, she suspected, a false trail laid by design or chance. But the real path? It wound through the hearts of those who danced that night, their steps leaving impressions deeper than soil. Human nature, after all, was the truest map, one charted in whispers, not miles. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Moonlight. The gloaming settled over St. Mary Mead like a velvet cloak, soft and enveloping, as the last vestiges of daylight bled into the horizon in streaks of bruised plum and faded rose. Street lamps along the high street kindled one by one, their gas mantles hissing to life with a gentle pop, casting elongated pools of buttery light that danced with the encroaching shadows. The village, having supped on simple fare, cottage pies bubbling with leeks and lamb, apple crumbles dusted with cinnamon from Mrs. Potts's ovens, now turned inward, drawing curtains against the chill and the creeping unease that the day's whispers had sown. From the church came the faint toll of the vesper bell, its single note a somber call to reflection, while in the blue boar, the murmur of voices rose and fell like the tide, punctuated by the clink of tankards and the occasional guffaw that rang hollow in the night. The clock tower dominated the square, its stone flanks etched in chiaroscuro by the moon's rising sickle, a pale crescent that promised fuller revelations in the days to come. The air was laced with the crisp bite of impending frost, mingled with the earthy perfume of turned soil from the allotments and the distant, resinous whiff of pine from the copses beyond the brook, a sensory tapestry that spoke of autumn's quiet resignation, yet underscored by the pall of unsolved malice. Miss Jane Marple, ensconced once more in the familiar confines of Danvers House, felt no pull toward the hearth's glow that evening. The garden party's spectral echoes, recounted with such vivid relish by Mrs. Potts, lingered in her mind like half-remembered dreams. Lanterns flickering, tempers flaring, the moon as both illuminator and conspirator. She had dined lightly on Emily's shepherd's pie, its flaky pastry yielding to a savory heart of minced mutton and carrots, washed down with a glass of elderflower cordial that fizzed gently on the tongue. Raymond, her nephew, had motored back to London at tea time, citing deadlines and the inspiration of rural horror, greeting her with a nuzzle cool as a cat's nose. The village lanes, narrow and winding, were hemmed by hedgerows heavy with hips and haws, their berries gleaming like tiny lanterns in the moonlight. An owl hooted from the churchyard yew, a spectral query that set her pulse to a thoughtful rhythm, and in the distance, a dog barked, a lone sentinel echoing the night's vigil. She passed the tea shop, its windows dark save for the faint glow of a back-room lamp where Mrs. Potts tallied the till, skirted the blue boar from which spilled the strains of a gramophone crooning Vera Lynn, and emerged into the square, where the clock tower awaited like an old acquaintance nursing a grudge. The tower's base was cordoned by the now familiar tape, fluttering desultorily in the breeze, but Miss Marple's reputation granted her unofficial passage. Constable Evans, stationed at a trestle table under a hurricane lantern, tipped his helmet with a blush. "Evening, miss. Inspector said to let you have a deco. Miss Marple's got eyes in her teacup, he says. Just don't touch, eh? Forensics chap from the county's due at dawn." She nodded graciously, her torch beam slicing the gloom to illuminate the cobblestones, still scarred by chalk outlines where Sir Reginald had lain. The wrench, bagged and removed, left only its ghost in the mind's eye, a blunt instrument of betrayal. Circling the plinth with the care of one navigating a minefield of china, she trained her light upward, where the tower's arched door yielded to a rusted iron spiral stair. "The works, Evans? Accessible?" "Top landing, miss. Gears like a clockmaker's nightmare. Vicar's been at it, but it's a proper tangle." He handed her a key ring with exaggerated caution, as if passing a crown jewel. Ascending the creaking treads, each step a protest of metal on metal, echoing like whispers in a confessional. Miss Marple emerged onto a narrow platform ringed by the 4 clock faces, their glass fogged with age and grime. The mechanism sprawled before her, a labyrinth of brass cogs and escapement toadstool on his thatch of white hair. Pausing her descent, Miss Marple called down, "Mr. Wilkins, a word if you're not too wearied." The knights turned sharp. Tom straightened with a grunt, wiping his brow on a sleeve that smelled of loam and liniment. "Miss Marple, out prowling like a barn owl, eh?" "Aye, a word. These privets, Sir Reginald's fussy lot. Wanted 'em clipped lunar style, round as the moon. Irony, that." He leaned on his shears, rheumy eyes squinting up at the tower's face. "Seen you poking about. Truth in the gears, is there?" "Truth's aplenty, Tom, like roots beneath the green," she replied, alighting the last steps with a hand on the rail for balance. They fell into step along the path, the moon now higher, silvering the leaves to quicksilver. Tom's gait was a hobble, his boots clog-soled and caked, leaving divots in the turf that echoed the mysterious print Mrs. Potts had mentioned. "You tended the grounds that party night. Ice and lanterns, was it? Any shadows that lingered?" He hawked and spat into the hedge, a habit born of fields, not malice. "Shadows. The moon made 'em long as sin, miss. Folk dancin', laughin', but eyes sharp, always. Saw the vicar bolt first, stompin' off like Judgment Day. Dr. Croft next. Slipped the noose early, bag in hand, headin' brookward. Thought it her, compact, brisk stride. Skulkin' by the tower round 10 bells. But eyes play tricks, could have been a fox in skirts." His gaze shifted then, sliding to the ground like spilled mercury, and Miss Marple noted the twitch, A tell as plain as a dropped stitch. A fox, perhaps, or a figure with purpose, she mused, her torch catching the glint of dew on a privet leaf. And Sir Reginald, his last promenade? Strolled the square post-fireworks, moon full on his watch, ticking proud. Art Lemon. The conservatory adjoined the east wing, a glassed haven of wicker and ferns, where moonlight filtered through palm fronds to dapple the rattan settee and silver filigree. Lydia rose from a chaise, her negligee of ivory silk whispering like a secret, a tray already laid, porcelain cups etched with hawthorn motifs, a silver teapot steaming with the citrus-tanged brew, and a plate of macaroons, almond shells sandwiched with rosewater cream, delicate as size. "Aunt Jane, how providential," Lydia greeted, her voice a velvet ribbon, though her gray eyes held the storm's edge. "I couldn't sleep. Ghosts in the gallery, you know. Sit, please. The tea's just drawn." She poured with the grace of one bred to salons, the liquid's amber glow catching the moon through the panes. Miss Marple accepted the cup, its warmth seeping through saucer to palm, and selected a macaroon whose crisp shell parted to a yielding heart, floral and fleeting. "Ghosts are unkind company, my dear," Miss Marple said softly, settling amid cushions plump with down. "Better tea and talk. The manor feels vast tonight, without your uncle's tread." Lydia's laugh tinkled, brittle as the glass dome overhead. "Vast? Echoing, rather, like a tomb with gilt edges. But the will, it changes everything. He redrafted it last month, after that beastly row with Cousin Edmund over the shares. To you, Lydia, all of it," he said, signing with a flourish. "The estate, the portfolio, the flat in Mayfair. I need it, Aunt Jane, desperately. My artistic pursuits. They've racked up bills in Paris, silly ateliers and unreliable patrons. Uncle threatened to cut me off. No more bohemian folly, he growled at luncheon last week. I pleaded, of course, tears and all, but he was adamant. Then, poof, the will, as if he'd a premonition." Miss Marple sipped, the tea's bite tempered by honey she'd stirred in, her gaze on Lydia's hands, long-fingered, unscarred by. Miss Marple stepped into the night, the manor's lights winking farewell. Lydia's tears theatrical, her debts a noose of necessity. Inheritance as motive, classic yet compelling. Her perambulations led her circuitously to the Blue Boar, where lamplight spilled onto the cobbles like spilled ale. The taproom thrummed with after-supper custom, darts thudding into cork, a shove halfpenny board rattling with coins, and behind the bar Harold Finch drawing pints with the flourish of a maestro. He spotted her through the smoke-hazed air, cigarillo tendrils wreathing beams black with age, and boomed a welcome. "Miss Marple, a nightcap? Lemon barley, on the house. Warms the cockles without the fog. Lemon barley, Mr. Finch." With gratitude, she accepted, perching on a high stool whose leather seat sighed under her. The inn's heart was its bar, mahogany scarred by generations of elbows, and etched with initials of long-departed roisterers. And Finch slid the glass across, fizzing pale, tart as gooseberries. "Heard from the constable, have you? That wrench business. My print's all over it, they say. Laughable, really." Miss Marple tasted the drink, its effervescence a bright note amid the beer's malty undercurrent. Prints are persistent, like regrets. A false lead, perhaps. False as a 3-pound note, Finch chuckled, though his ruddy cheeks paled a shade. Lent it to Sir Reginald days afore the party. His manor's tap sprung a leak, fancy plumbing from the war. Keep it handy, Finch, he says. A publican multitasks. Wiped it down after, but prints linger, don't they? Bessie swears I never left the pumps. Poured around at 10 sharp, when the scream came later. Alibi tight as a drum. She nodded, the barley's zing cleansing the palate. Tight, yes, but leaks spring in odd places. The party, you served till the end? Till the last spark died. But debts, they gnaw me fleetingly as village reputations under scrutiny. The high street stirred to its customary rhythm. The milk float rattling with the chime of glass bottles, their cream tops nodding like curtsies. The post office door swinging open to admit a queue of farmers clutching letters scented with homegrown lavender. And from the bakery, the irresistible allure of fresh currant buns, their glazed surfaces glistening under the eaves like morning dew on a pastry tray. Yet the air held a subtle chill, not merely from the season's turn, but from the persistent shadow of the clock tower, its silhouette a stark reminder on the skyline. The police tape now limp and dew-soaked, fluttering like a widow's veil in the breeze. Whispers had multiplied overnight, carried on the wings of early risers. The inspector had questioned the gypsy caravan at dawn, only to find it vanished like smoke. And talk turned inevitably to the manor's secrets, where Sir Reginald's ledgers might harbor grudges sharper than any shears. Miss Jane Marple, having breakfasted on poached eggs nestled in buttered muffins, yolks as golden as the autumn gorse, accompanied by a pot of lapsang souchong whose smoky depth evoked distant pine forests, felt the inexorable pull toward Hawthorne Manor. Her parlor, with its chintz curtains drawn against the glare and a vase of chrysanthemums nodding sagely on the mantel, had served as a nocturnal loom for her thoughts. The smuggler's path a hidden artery, Lydia's artful tears a veneer too polished, Tom's evasive glance a knot in the yarn. The manor, she confided to Emily over a second cup of tea, the leaves swirling in her saucer like eddies in a brook, holds the heart of it, the papers, the private words. One must tread lightly, like a cat on hot bricks, but tread one must. Emily, folding linens with the crisp snaps of domestic authority, nodded vigorously. Take the tartan cape, miss. Damp's the devil for the joints. And mind the drive. Ruts from the party motors deep as regrets. Thus attired, Miss Marple set forth, stripes of palest saffron and cream. A turkey rug muffling the hearth's occasional pop, and French doors opening onto the knot garden, where boxwoods twisted in geometric parterres like the plot's own convolutions. Lydia awaited on a sofa upholstered in damask the color of stewed plums, her morning gown of sprigged muslin a concession to morning's decorum, though her cheeks bloomed with the rouge of resolve. A silver tray graced the low table, a Georgian teapot etched with hawthorn sprigs, cups of eggshell china, and a tiered stand bearing seed cakes, light as clouds, studded with caraway that pricked the tongue like tiny revelations, and cucumber sandwiches, their crusts trimmed to precision, filled with cream cheese and watercress for a fresh, peppery bite. Aunt Jane, how kind to come so promptly, Lydia said, rising with a rustle and extending a hand cool as marble. The house, It echoes without Uncle's bluster. Sit, please. The Darjeeling's just at temperature, with milk on the side if you fancy. Her voice held the lilt of one composing herself for a recital, but Miss Marple noted the flicker in her gray eyes, the way her fingers drummed the saucer's edge, a staccato of suppressed anxiety. Miss Marple settled with a murmur of thanks, pouring the tea whose amber stream steamed gently, releasing bergamot's citrus whisper. She added a cloud of milk, watching it marble the surface like secrets diluting in confession, and selected a sandwich whose crisp cress yielded to creamy tang. Echoes can be instructive, my dear, carrying whispers from rooms long shuttered. Your uncle's study, a place of such echoes, I imagine. With his passing, might I? Lydia's nod was swift, almost eager. Of course. The inspector pawed through it yesterday, like a terrier after bones. Nothing amiss, he said, but take your time. Hargreaves will show you. The key's on his chain. She paused, nibbling a seed cake whose crumbs dusted her lap like fallen like everything. She rose then, smoothing her skirts. The study awaits, Aunt Jane. I'll ring for Hargreaves. The study lay at the house's core, a paneled sanctum of oak and leather that smelled of pipe tobacco and vellum. Sir Reginald's den, where ledgers were balanced and tempers kindled like hearth fires. Hargreaves unlocked the door with a key that jangled like accusatory chains, admitting Miss Marple to a room where sunlight slanted through diamond-paned windows to gild the chaos. A partner's desk strewn with foolscap, its green leather blotter scarred by inkwells and elbows, bookshelves sagging under tomes of estate law and Gothic romances, Sir Reginald's guilty indulgences, and a coal scuttle by the grate, half full of ash that whispered of late nights. A Persian rug muffled her steps, its blues and crimsons faded to whispers, and on the walls hung oils of stern hawthorns past, their eyes following her like jury members. Miss Marple began at the desk, her gloved hands sifting papers with the delicacy of one handling cobweb-fine lace. The top drawer yielded correspondence, a sheaf of bills, crisp as autumn leaves, from tradesmen in market basing, unpaid, their edges curling like pleas ignored. One caught her eye, Dr. Croft's invoice for consultations, thrice rendered, marked overdue, clinic fund in jeopardy. A marginal scrawl in Sir Reginald's spidery hand. Quack's nonsense, defer. Motive in ink, sharp as a lancet. Deeper still, a locked cubby. Hargreaves provided the key with a murmur of master's private. Revealed gambling chits, yellowed and dog-eared. IOUs to the blue boar, totaling a sum that would stagger a publican's ledger. Each signed H. Finch in a hand bold as his laugh. Debts compound like interest, she mused, fanning them like a losing hand. The correspondence basket brimmed with missives, invitations to hunt balls, declined with curt regrets. A solicitor's note on the will's revision, dated a fortnight past. To niece Lydia Beaumont, in toto, per verbal instruction. Firms. A velvet pouch of sovereigns that clinked like conspirators, and a slim dossier labeled L. Beaumont, accounts. Bills from Parisian couturiers, overdrafts from a Mayfair bank, sums that danced toward ruin. Artistic license, Miss Marple whispered, closing the safe with a soft thud. Inheritance as lifeline or lure. Her explorations led her, by Hargreaves's direction, to Lydia's boudoir. a confection of rosewood and lace where the air smelled of attar and ambition. The room overlooked the lily pond, its casement ajar to admit the breeze's murmur, and the vanity bore crystal flacons winking in the light. Miss Beaumont suggested you might glance here, the butler said, withdrawing with a bow. Miss Marple's search was gentle. The dressing table's drawers held stockings sheer as whispers. A locket with a miniature of Sir Reginald, stern even in youth, and beneath a pile of fashion plates a slim volume bound in morocco, its spine unmarked. A diary locked with a trivial clasp that yielded to her hairpin like a secret to coaxing. The pages in Lydia's looping hand chronicled the mundane gilded with guile. Teas at the Ritz, sittings with sculptors whose names rang of Montparnasse. But deeper, dated to midsummer. E arrived incognito. Moonlit rendezvous by the Serpentine. Promises of galleries, but eyes on the fortune. Uncle suspects, must tread silkily. Initials only, but the scent of intrigue. Affair perhaps with a patron whose affections tangled with avarice. Entries trailed to the party's eve. You, altars will, relief but chains. E urges elopement, folly. Moon hides much. Miss Marple closed the book, slipping it back with care. Secrets in script. Affairs as alibi, steady gaze. Miss Marple, standard procedure, ma'am. Forensics matched the residue. Residue, yes, but context eludes. She interposed mildly, extending a hand for the trowel. Evans, schooled in deference, surrendered it. She tilted it to the light, where the stain gleamed rusty brown, flecked with clay particles and the metallic sheen of iron oxide. Garden soil, my dear constable, mixed with verdigris from the shears age. A simple test. Dampen a corner of cloth. No hemoglobin bloom, only earth's blush. Tom's innocence lies in the dirt he tends, not the blood he spills. The sergeant snorted, but Evans wavered, signaling a halt. Reckon we take it to the lab then. Can't hurt. Tom, slumped against the motor, met her eyes with watery gratitude. Knew you'd see, miss. Like weeds from wheat. As the constables conferred, Miss Marple turned to Lydia, who hovered pale as milk posset. A false vintage, my dear. Misdirection's vintage. But clues, they surface like bubbles in good champagne. The motor departed with Tom in tow. For safekeeping, Evans muttered, leaving the drive to settle in uneasy quiet. Miss Marple's mind, however, raced. The arrest a diversion, hasty as overproofed dough. Yet in the Square's forensics report, whispered by Evans in reluctant confidence, lay another nugget, a button, pearl and clerical, snagged in the cobblestones near the body. Vicar's collar stock, the lad confided. Lost in the scuffle, they say. Craddock summoning Thorne for tea and questions. Miss Marple paused by the lily pond, where a koi surfaced with lazy grace, its mouth a silent O of curiosity. The button, a clerical pearl, pointing to Thorne like an arrow to the vicar's breast, yet misdirection hummed in her veins. Planted, perhaps, by a hand versed in sleight. Lydia's, with her diary's shadows, or another's, diverting from deeper debts, the study's papers, the hidden affair, all threads leading not to conclusion, but convolution. Like a Persian carpet, she reflected, adjusting her cape against the orange pippins and quince's blushing rose. A pair of spaniels quarreled amiably over a bone outside the butcher's, their yips a counterpoint to the rhythmic clang of the anvil from the farrier's forge. And from the post office emerged Mrs. Price Ridley, her arms laden with parcels tied in brown paper and string, her hat a jaunty concoction of felt and pheasant feathers that bobbed with each indignant stride. Yet for all this veneer of normalcy, the undercurrent of suspense rippled like a stone skipped across the duck pond. Heads turned at every footfall, conversations hushed at the sight of a policeman's helmet. And the clock tower, its face now scrubbed clean by county experts, though the hands remained stubbornly fixed at midday, loomed as a mute oracle, whispering of times halted and truths delayed. Miss Jane Marple, having lunched frugally on cold chicken and piccalilli, its mustardy tang a sharp reminder of life's piquancies, amid the sunlit hush of her conservatory, felt the threads of the mystery coiling tighter in her mind, like wool gathered for a particularly intricate Fair Isle pattern. The Manor's revelations had sown seeds of clarity amid the confusion. Lydia's diary with its elliptical intimations of shadowed liaisons, the ledger's unforgiving tallies of debts and denials, Tom's exoneration, as abrupt as it was contrived. The clerical button, that pearl of apparent proof, nagged at her like a dropped stitch. Too convenient, too pointed toward the vicar, whose oily cuff bespoke not malice but misguided zeal. "Threads," she murmured to the finches pecking at the sill, their beaks darting like inquisitive needles, "must be pulled, one by one, till the weave shows its design." A note dispatched via Emily to Inspector Craddock, suggesting a parish council of sorts at Potts's Emporium, had elicited a gruff assent. "Your tea-shop salons beat my cells, Miss Marple. 2:00 sharp." Thus, with her tartan cape draped over one arm and a basket containing a flask of nettle tea, for the digestion, the nerves, the lots assembled, grumbling like storm clouds, but civil. Inspectors in the snug, nursing a headache and a pot of his own. Miss Marple bestowed a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes like well-loved vellum. "Splendid, Mrs. Potts. Your scones are fortresses in times of siege. A pot of Earl Grey for the table, if you please, and lemon slices thin as whispers." She surveyed the gathering with the quiet appraisal of one assessing a quilt for flaws. Vicar Elias Thorne at the head, his black broadcloth absorbing the light, breviary open but unread before him like a shield. Dr. Amelia Croft beside him, her medical bag at her feet like a faithful hound, spectacles perched on her nose as she leafed through a dog-eared lancet. Harold Finch sprawled at the far end, his waistcoat unbuttoned a notch too far, a tankard of ale substituting for tea with defiant gusto. Lydia Beaumont, elegant in dove-gray wool, her fingers tracing the rim of a saucer as if divining futures in porcelain. And Tom Wilkins, released that morning on Craddock's grudging caution, hunched in the corner with a mug clutched in gnarled hands, his eyes darting like a cornered fox's. Inspector Craddock emerged from the snug then, his mustache damp from a hasty ablution, notebook at the ready like a duelist's foil. "Ladies, gentlemen, and Wilkins," he began, clearing his throat with a rumble. "This isn't formal, mind. Just a chinwag to untangle the knots. Miss Marple's suggested ground rules: candor over cream, no bluster. Questions?" The vicar straightened, his voice resonant as a pulpit echo. "Candor, Inspector? Commendable. though I confess this summons smacks of inquisition, me dragged from Vesper's prep like a penitent to the stake. His blue eyes, faded but fierce, flicked to Miss Marple with a mix of reproach and reluctant respect. "Stakes are for martyrs, Vicar," she replied mildly, settling at the table's flank and pouring tea with steady hands, the amber liquid steaming like exhaled truths privately. Then, fool that I am, after the inspector's probing, I replaced it, near the body line, under cover of fog, to divert, you see, from the oil on my cuff the quarrel's heat. 'Twould point to me as vandal, not villain. I argued with him, yes, fierce words on stewardship. But murder? The sixth commandment bars it. Black is my coat. Mrs. Potts, circulating with a platter of scones, flaky crowns split to reveal jam's ruby gleam, gasped audibly, a crumb tumbling from her lip. Vicar, planted evidence? Like a penny dreadful, Thorne's gaze dropped, chastened. Pride, Mrs. Potts, deadly sin. I fixed the bells myself that night, post-party. Oiled the gears with a tin from the vestry, gloves be damned. Smudge from sanctity's labor, not sabotage. Forgive me. Craddock scribbled furiously, his pen scratching like a beetle under bark, while Miss Marple nodded sagely, buttering a scone whose warmth evoked hearthside confessions. Pride weaves fine threads, Vicar, easily snagged. But your hands clean of blood. The oil speaks of devotion, not destruction. The doctor's laugh barked then, short and surgical, as she accepted a scone slathered in clotted cream that purled like dew. Devotion? Spare us the homily, Thorne. If we're confessing, here's mine. The will. Sir Reginald's solicitor rang yesterday. Clause buried like a bad tooth. No bequest to the clinic fund, despite his nods at Easter. Personal charities only, the draft reads. His wines, his hunts. I pressed him at every consultation. Land for healing, Reginald, not hoarding. He dithered, promised deeds, then reneged in ink. Motive? Enough to throttle, perhaps, but not with a wrench. My bag's tools are for mending pipes and poultices, not skulls. Alibi holds. Twins at Giles's farm till 1 a.m., corroborated by the midwife and a squalling babe. Lydia's fingers tightened on her cup, the telegram from his waistcoat, creased as an accordion. Alibi's iron, or was. Bessie swears I poured till closing, but the gel's sweet on me, see? Craddock's lads grilled her fresh. Left for 10, Gov, round 9:30, for a puff by the brook. Back afore the fireworks. Smoke break, honest. Lungs like a bellows from the fags. But 10 minutes? Enough for a stroll, not a slaughter. Craddock's mustache quivered, his notebook filling with marginalia. 10 minutes, Finch, sliver of time. Path from the boar to the tower's a hop. Witnesses? None but the moon, Inspector, and she don't talk. Finch's laugh boomed but faltered, his fingers drumming the table like rain on a tin roof. Miss Marple observed the tick, filing it beside the ale's yeasty scent clinging to his cuffs. A publican's perfume, masking nerves. Tom Wilkins stirred then, his voice a gravelly rumble from the corner, where he nursed a mug of tea gone cold as regret. Time's a thief, all right. Steals more'n minutes. I locked the shed at dusk, home to me chair by 8. But that print, me boots, they say? Clogs, ridged from the clay pits. Wore 'em party night, haulin' ice. But blood on me trowel? Rust and rot, as Miss Marple proved. Sacked me boy for spite. Union whispers. He called 'em treason. Grudge, deep as roots, but kill leaves the garden barren. Lydia's gaze softened toward him, a flutter of lashes like moth wings. Tom, loyal shadow, Uncle undervalued you, as he did us all. But that diary the inspector found in my room, private scribbles, nothing more. A dalliance in town, art world's folly, not felony. Miss Marple, who had listened with the patience of a seamstress threading a needle's eye, set down her cup, the dregs forming a leaf pattern she ignored, and rose slightly, her voice soft yet carrying like a bell's peal. Threads, dear friends, each a filament of frailty, woven into seeming guilt. Continued, her tone as gentle as a hand on a fevered brow. Party ended at 11. Scream at 10 past. Midnight, a fiction, to cloak the true tick. Perhaps 9:30, aligning with Mr. Finch's puff, or the doctor's early exit. The killer staged it, smashed to feign a later hour, when alibis thinned. Not robbery's haste, but calculation's cold hand. Craddock leaned in, his breath whistling through his mustache. Staged, by Jove, fakes the timeline, muddies the path. Who had the tool, the grudge to grind time itself? The room held its breath, scones cooling untouched, jam congealing like blood in a vein. Thorne murmured a prayer under his breath. Croft's fingers twitched toward her bag. Finch's drum ceased. Lydia's saucer rattled. Tom's mug trembled. Miss Marple smiled then, faint as dawn's first blush, gathering the pouch with reverent care. Threads unravel, Inspector, but the knot remains. Human nature. It's like tea leaves in the pot. Stirred, they cloud. Settled, they spell the pattern. Mrs. Potts, breaking the spell with a clatter of fresh pots, bustled round with digestive biscuits, Odie rounds whose crumbly comfort promised solace. More tea, all. Revelations dry the throat like sawdust. Chatter resumed in eddies, Thorne defending his minor subterfuge as pastoral panic. Croft dissecting the will's medical negligence. Finch jesting of, "Time's a great thief, but I'm no pickpocket." Yet beneath, eyes darted, accusations unspoken, alliances shifting like sand under tide. As the gathering dispersed into the afternoon's gold, Thorne to his bells, Croft to her calls, Finch to his pumps, Lydia to the manor with a backward glance like a thrown gauntlet, Tom to his hedges with a nod of quiet thanks. Miss Marple lingered by the pie, its crust golden and flaky, the filling rich with onions and thyme, and mugs of cocoa steaming with a whisper of vanilla. From the blue board drifted the subdued strains of a piano accordion, wheezing out the ash grove in a minor key that tugged at heartstrings like a loose thread in a sampler, while in the churchyard the yew trees rustled secrets to the headstones, their branches etched black against the rising moon. A gibbous orb, 3/4 full, casting a luminous veil that turned the cobblestones to silvered ripples, and the thatched roofs to waves frozen mid-crest. The air held the crisp promise of frost, laced with the faint resinous bite of wood smoke from bonfires smoldering in back gardens, where leaves crackled like old love letters committed to flame. Yet, beneath this serene nocturne hummed the unresolved discord of the day. The watch's shattered fiction, alibis fraying at the edges like hemmed lace, and suspects scattering like chaff in the wind, each carrying a kernel of truth or a husk of deceit. Miss Jane Marple, back at Danvers' house after the tea shop's revelations, found no solace in the supper Emily had prepared. A modest omelette aux fines herbes, its eggs fluffy as cumulus clouds and folded over a confit of mushrooms, whose earthy tang evoked forest floors after rain, accompanied by a crisp salad of watercress and radishes dressed in vinaigrette sharp as suspicion. She ate mechanically, her fork tracing patterns in the yolk that mirrored the watch's cracked face, while Raymond's latest letter, postmarked from his London garret, effusing over auntly intuition as plot pivot, lay unopened on the sideboard. The parlor, with its horsehair sofa yielding softly under her slight frame, and the mantel clock chiming the half-hour in a tone as reassuring as a neighbor's "good evening," should have been a balm. Yet the puzzle gnawed at her, insistent as a loose button on a cuff. The timeline's deliberate skew, the button's planted piety, the debt's corrosive weight, the conspirator's eye, and brushing the blue boar's rear yard, where empty barrels loomed like silent witnesses to Finch's fleeting absence. The moon, climbing steadily, bathed her path in a pearlescent sheen, turning puddles to mirrors and hedgerows to lacework, while an owl's hoot punctuated the hush like a question mark in a well-turned phrase. The square opened before her like a stage set for soliloquy. The clock tower its brooding proscenium, stone flanks veined with moonlight, the arched door a yawning portal to forgotten hours. Constable Evans, his vigil reduced to a thermos of tea and a dog-eared Western novel, straightened at her approach, his helmet casting a shadow like a halo askew. "Miss Marple, evening, ma'am. Craddock's given the nod for your perambulations. Just signed the log. Marple's moonlit musings," he jotted. "Torch from the kit if you fancy. Tower's clear till forensics wraps at dawn." She accepted the implement with a murmur of thanks, its beam steady as her resolve, and slipped past the tape, the air within the stairwell cool and clammy, redolent of dust motes and oiled metal. A crypt for chronology. Ascending the spiral once more, treads groaning like old bones under her slight weight, Miss Marple emerged onto the platform, where the mechanism sprawled in arrested splendor. Cogs interlocked in eternal stasis, counterweights dangling like pendulums denied their swing. The whole a brass filigree frozen at midday's banal apex. The night wind whispered through the clock face's apertures, carrying the faint toll of a distant abbey bell. St. Aldhelm's, perhaps, 5 miles off, its chimes a mocking counterpoint. She trained her torch downward, then extinguished it, yielding to the moon's dominion. And there, revelation in silhouette. The tower's shadow stretched eastward like a divining rod, elongated by the lunar angle to align precisely with a thicket of brambles at the square's fringe. What daylight dismissed as mere overgrowth now honey, worn but warm, and Miss Marple descended with care, joining him on a weathered slab of stone that overlooked the brook's murmur. A rill silvered by moonlight, its banks fringed with willow whips that swayed like whispering courtiers. Tom puffed his pipe, the bowl glowing cherry red, exuding the malty aroma of Cavendish tobacco that mingled with the night's damp loam. He offered her the flask from her cape, unscrewed with arthritic deliberation, and she sipped the nettle tea, its herbal tang a green fire against the chill, warming her from gullet to toes. Peace, Tom. Elusive as a straight furrow in rocky soil. The path there, Smuggler's Vein. You spoke of it. Steps light that night? He nodded, smoke wreathing his cap like a dubious crown, eyes roomy reflections of the moon. Aye, miss. The old run, from the boar yard to the tower's blind side. Used it myself, party night, haulin' crates of claret, dodgin' the swells. But after, heard rustles, quick-like. Thought poachers or lovers slinkin'. Moon showed shapes, but not faces. Compact one, brisk, bag swingin'. Dr. Croft, I reckoned. House call, she said. But now, nah. And me, clean of the big sin, but not the small. He paused, pipe stem clenched between teeth yellowed as old ivory, and from his pocket drew a twist of chamois, unfolding it to reveal a glint. Lady Montague's emerald necklace, its chain fine as spider silk, the pendant a teardrop of verdant fire that caught the lunar ray like a captive star. Miss Marple's breath caught, soft as a sigh, but her gaze remained steady. Accusation veiled in curiosity. Petty theft, Tom. The missing bauble. Red herring no longer, but yours? He deflated, shoulders rounding like sodden earth after rain, the necklace cradled in palms calloused as oak bark. Aye, miss. Fool's folly. Party chaos into the hedgerows like a benevolent gnome, and turned her steps toward Hawthorne Manor, the flask now empty save for echoes of Nettle's virtue. The drive, moon-drenched and spectral, welcomed her with the crunch of gravel underfoot, and Lydia's voice hailed from the portico, a silhouette in lace against the manor's glow. Aunt Jane? Out stargazing? Come in, the conservatory's lit, and I've salvaged a pot of chamomile. Calms the midnight frets. The glassed haven enveloped them in humid warmth. Ferns unfurling like green sentinels, the air heavy with jasmine's narcotic sigh, and the faint citrus bite of the tea steaming from a spode pot. Lydia in a peignoir of moon-pale chiffon that whispered with each gesture, poured with trembling hands, cups clinking like nervous teeth, adding honey that swirled golden eddies. Frites indeed, my dear, Miss Marple said, settling onto a rattan chaise whose cushions sighed like old friends. The tea's floral mildness a balm after the night's revelations. The diary, your private pages. The inspector returned it today, with apologies for the intrusion. But words, they linger, like perfume on a letter. Lydia's laugh tinkled, fragile as the glass dome overhead, but her gray eyes, storm-veiled, hardened to flint, lingering, like bad debts at a soiree. Scribbles of sentiment, Aunt Jane. E., the sculptor from Montmartre. Charms and checks his trade, mine the muse. Uncle sniffed it out. Bohemian barnacles, he called them, threatening to dock my allowance. The wills change? A truce, bought with tears over tiffin. But motive? Love's folly, not fratricide. And the footprint, those ridged marks by the plinth? Not mine. Paris heels leave no such tread, silk slippers for the party, dancing till dawn. She extended a foot, slipper embroidered with seed pearls that caught the lantern light like dewdrops. Soul smooth as vanity's lie. Miss Marple sipped, the chamomile's apple sweet up, the air within sharp with carbolic and camphor. Miss Marple, midnight malady, or clue-chasing colic? Croft's grin was wry, but her eyes, hazel and hawkish, betrayed the night's toll. Colic of the conscience, doctor. Your wrench, the one in your bag, twin to the murder's mate. Borrowed perhaps for repairs beyond the tap? Croft's laugh was a scalpel's slice, precise and painless. Borrowed, astute as a biopsy. Lent it to Finch a week prior. His inn's boiler groaned like a dying elephant. Publican's plight, I thought. Handy for the wrenching, he joked, returning it smeared with grease but whole. My prince? Faint as a fever's flush, gloved for the loan. Alibis my scalpel. Twins at midnight, blood and balls my witnesses. But the path you mean, the Brookside sneak? I took it post-party, yes. House call to old Mrs. Archer, lumbago flaring. Bag for the liniment, steps for the shortcut. Saw naught but willows weeping. Miss Marple nodded, the revelation settling like sediment in a vial. Wrench wandered from Croft's satchel to Finch's grip, then perhaps onward. A borrowed bludgeon, passed like a hot potato in the dark. Shortcuts save time, doctor, but shadows lengthen them. As the first robin trilled from the eaves, a herald of reluctant morn, Miss Marple retraced her path to Danvers' house, the moon paling to a ghost in the sky. Emily stirred the embers in the kitchen range, yawning like a cat in sun, and brewed a final pot. Darjeeling, robust as resolve, with biscuits crisp as autumn frost. Sipping by the window, where the clock tower's spire pierced the dawn like a steeple's promise, Miss Marple smiled. A faint curve, like the moon's own waning crescent. It's like village gossip, Emily. Truth hides in the whispers, emerging only when the pot stirred just so. The threads narrowed, path trod by Croft or another. Wrench waylaid by Finch, theft Tom's burden. Street. Nor a ripple marred the duck pond's glassy surface beyond the churchyard. Only the faint, rhythmic hoot of an owl from the yews broke the hush, a spectral herald to the drama about to unfold. Villagers, sensing the night's import through some collective instinct honed by generations of harvest moons and whispered folklore, had drawn their curtains early, peeking through lace at the square where lanterns, fueled by whale oil and hung from iron brackets, flickered to life, casting pools of amber that danced with the encroaching silver. From the blue boar seeped the murmur of subdued voices, tankards clinking like distant chimes, while in the tea shop, Mrs. Potts polished her counters with unnecessary vigor, her ears attuned to the summons that had rippled through the village like a stone in a puddle. Miss Marple calls a gathering, at the tower, under the moon. All who were there that night. Miss Jane Marple had orchestrated the affair with the quiet precision of a composer penning a finale, her notes dispatched by Emily's bicycle, crisp missives on lavender-scented paper sealed with a thimble's imprint, to uncover the shadow behind the light. Attend at 9, when the moon crests the spire. Truth waits for no alibi. She herself arrived as the church clock, repaired that very afternoon by a tinker from Market Basing, its bells now tolling clear and resonant, struck the hour, her figure slight and shrouded in a cape of midnight wool, its hood framing her face like a portrait in chiaroscuro. The lantern light caught the steel in her eyes, sharp as the needles in her ever-present knitting bag, and her steps on the cobblestones were measured, unhurried, as if she promenaded a garden path rather than a stage of judgment. Inspector Craddock awaited her at the tower's base, his overcoat buttoned to the throat against the chill, mustache bristling like a hedgehog roused from slumber, flanked by Constable Evans, who shifted foot to foot, his helmet a beacon under the moon. "Ma'am," Craddock greeted with a nod that dipped deeper than deference. The lots assembled, grumbling but here, her raven hair loose in waves that cascaded like a waterfall of night. Tom Wilkins, bent and hooded in his cap, hands twisting a cap like a penitent's rosary. Others hovered at the fringes, Mrs. Potts with a thermos of tea for medicinal purposes, the postmaster Higgs with his pipe, even young Bessie from the Boar, her apron twisted in nervous fingers. The moon crested the spire then, a perfect alignment that bathed the tower in unblinking silver, turning faces to masks of porcelain and eyes to gleaming onyx. Miss Marple stepped forward, her cape falling open to reveal the simple brooch at her throat, a silver thimble, emblem of her domestic sorcery, and the circle tightened, breaths held like threads on a loom. "Dear friends," she began, her tone warm as a fireside tale yet edged with the precision of a lancet. "We gather not in morning's chill, but in pursuit of warmth, the light of truth, which this moon so generously lends. So Reginald's shadow lingers, but shadows flee the full orb's gaze. Tonight we lift the veil on his end, not a thunderclap of villainy, but a tapestry woven of frailties we all share. Ambition's thorn, love's tangle, pride's quiet poison. Human nature, you see, is like my knitting. Patterns emerge from plain yarn, but pull the wrong thread and all unravels." A murmur rippled, Thorne's amen, Croft's skeptical huff, Finch's low chuckle like gravel under boot. Lydia's eyes, stormy gray, fixed on her with the intensity of a portrait subject sensing the artist's unflinching stroke. Miss Marple raised a hand, gloved in kid soft as conscience, and from her bag withdrew the chamois pouch, its contents glinting as she unfurled it. The shattered watch, crystal crazed like a spider's web spun of moonlight, hands defiant at midnight. Gasps echoed, Bessie's a squeak, Tom's a wheeze, and Craddock's notebook flipped open, pen poised like a rapier. "The hour," she continued, holding it aloft over dance, wrench in hand from the lone. A blow in rage, then panic's cover. Finch's laugh boomed, but hollow, echoing off the tower like a dirge. Rage, over a monkey at cards. I'd clout him verbal, but bash his brains, leave stains, miss, on cuffs, on conscience. Bessie swears I poured till 10, the break was lungs, not lethal. Miss Marple nodded, almost pitying. Stains, yes, but gloves hide them, as they hid the oil on the vicar's cuff. Your alibi cracks, Mr. Finch, not from Bessie's fondness, but the barmaid's slip. Left at 9:30, back afore the sparks. Time for the path's traverse, the strike, the flight. Yet wait. The wrench, wiped but not wholly. Your prints faint, overlaid by another's grip. Not sole villainy, but a chain, the tool past, the deed shared in shadow. Thorne's breviary thumped shut, his voice thundering like a sermon on Sinai. Shared, sin's not communal, Miss Marple. Like the plague, it festers alone. My button. Planted folly, yes, but murder. The Lord's hand stayed mine, though words flew hot as hellfire over bells and baubles. Your hand stayed by grace, vicar, zeal's misstep, the button's burial, diverting from your midnight mend. But the path? Untrod by you that night. Prayer, not path, your vigil. She turned then, her eyes softening on Tom, who shrank under the moon's unsparing gaze. And you, Tom, thief of emeralds, not life. The necklace, petty gleam for a son's debts, hidden in the shed like a thorn in conscience. Footprint yours? No. Clogs match, but your hobble leaves no such spry impression. The real tread, disguised by heels wrapped in laborer's rags to mimic the gardener's ridge. Tom's cap twisted tighter, his mutter gravelly as the brook sped. Theft's me shame, miss, fenced it closer, her brooch catching the light like a tiny moon, voice dropping to the intimacy of confessional. Follies, Lydia, or fuel? The entry, midsummer. You suspects E, must tread silkily. Jealousy stoked, will as weapon, withheld, then granted. But rage at the tower, lured by a note, moonlit word on the legacy, uncle, the path, unseen. 9:30, fireworks cover, wrench from Finch, borrowed under pretense of manor leak. Strike in fury, not at the change but the threat to revoke, whispered in that final clash. Ease a fortune hunter. You'll beg in garrets. The blow lands, panic rises, watch smashed with your heel, disguised print pressed in mud, necklace stolen to stage robbery. Moonlight, your ally, illuminates flight down the path, cloaks the blood in silver wash. The circle gasped as one. Thorn's cross sign, Croft's impossible, Finch's mug clattering to stone. Lydia staggered back, silk whispering like a traitor's hiss, her face a moon-pale mask cracking to reveal the storm beneath, eyes wild as tempests, lips parted in a rictus of denial. Lies, fabrications, shadows twisted to shapes. I danced till dawn, made swear, slippers soft. Soft, yes, but rags bound the heels. Tom's from the shed, found this morn, stained with mud and your perfume's trace, attar of roses. The note? Burned in your grate, but ash yields script. Meet at the plinth, the moon sees all. Your hand, Lydia, greed's elegant flourish. Inheritance not balm, but blade, to fund E's galleries, silence uncle's veto. Human nature, it's predictable as the moon's rise, waxing to full, then wane to truth. Craddock surged forward, cuffs glinting like manacles forged in moonlight. But Lydia's cry rent the night, a keening wail that echoed off the tower like a banshee's lament. Predictable? You witch! Prying spinster, knitting fates from tea leaves away. Motor purring to life in the square's edge. Taillights winking farewell like fallen stars. The moon wheeled on, impartial, as the gathering dispersed. Shadows merging with shadows. Whispers trailing like comet tails. Miss Marple lingered, alone now with the tower, her cape drawn close against the chill that seeped from stone and soul alike. Predictable, yes, she murmured to the night, but pitiable, like a pattern flawed from the start. The moon reveals, but dawn mends. The bells tolled 10 then, clear, resonant, time reclaimed. And she turned homeward, the square emptying to hush. Truth's weight light as lifted yarn. Chapter 10. Tea and Tranquility. The morning after the moon's merciless unveiling dawned upon St. Mary Mead with the tender mercy of a village emerging from a long winter's nap. The sun ascending in a sky of flawless Wedgwood blue, its rays slanting across the thatched roofs and dew-kissed meadows like a benediction from some benevolent deity. A gentle mist lingered in the hollows, veiling the hedgerows in gossamer that sparkled with the promise of evaporation, while the air, crisp yet kind, scented with the loamy breath of turned earth from the allotments, and the faint honeyed undertone of bees foraging in the late-blooming Michaelmas daisies, whispered of renewal. The high street stirred with the unhurried grace of redemption. The milkman's cart trundled along with its familiar rattle, bottles clinking like wind chimes in a zephyr. The greengrocer's stall overflowed with windfall apples, their skins blushed crimson and gold, piled beside jars of bramble jelly that gleamed like captured sunsets. And from the bakery wafted the irresistible perfume of Eccles cakes, their flaky pastry lattices enclosing a currant heart sticky as preserved secrets. Children scampered toward the schoolhouse, their laughter a cascade of silver bells untainted by the night. Sentinel in apron and cap stirred a pot of porridge on the aga, oats swelling creamy under the influence of cream from Farmer Giles's Jersey herd, flecked with raisins plump as secrets, and a drizzle of heather honey that lent a golden whisper of moorland winds. "Miss," Emily said, her ruddy cheeks flushed from the stove's heat. "The kettle's on for the big pot, Darjeeling, strong as a navvy's handshake, with those silver strainers you favor. And the scones, fresh from the oven, plain and treacle, split and waiting for the clotted." Mrs. Potts sent a jar of her damson jam, "for the victors," she called it. "The lot's due at 10 sharp, the vicar with his tracts, the doctor with her bag, empty of wrenches, thank the Lord, Finch with a flagon of his best bitter, for medicinal toasts. And Miss Lydia, well, the constables say she's remanded till the assizes, but the others, relieved as lambs after shearing." Miss Marple, attired in a gown of dove-gray poplin with a lace collar as fine as spider silk, paused in her arrangement of the tea tray. Bone china cups painted with forget-me-nots, a tiered stand for the scones whose crusts crackled golden, and a silver teapot etched with hawthorn motifs, steaming gently, as if impatient for discourse. Her white hair, pinned in its habitual chignon, caught the light filtering through the leaded casement, and her spectacles perched on her nose like instruments of gentle inquiry. Relief is the finest restorative, Emily, like a good night's sleep after a fever. Lydia's path led to shadows, but the light finds us all in time. Set an extra place for Inspector Craddock. His mustache deserves a scone. And the nettle cordial for the vicar's digestion. Sermons tax it so. She smiled then, faint as dawn's first blush, and carried the tray to the parlor, where the bow window overlooked the herb garden. Rose settling brew with maternal clucks. They settled into the circle of armchairs and the sofa, the turkey rug muffling their footfalls, the fire in the grate crackling a welcoming underscore to the tea's pour, a robust stream of Darjeeling that filled the air with bergamot's citrus elegance. "Dear friends," Miss Marple began, handing Thorne his cup. "Milk first, 2 sugars, as befitted a man of contemplative pauses." Her voice soft yet resonant, like the bell's echo lingering in the rafters. "We convene not in sorrow's wake, but in gratitude's glow." The moon revealed, the dawn affirms. Tea strengthens the thread of community, and today we mend what frayed. Scones, all, treacle for the sweetening of spirits. She split one herself, the knife yielding to flaky layers that parted to reveal the dark, sticky ribbon of treacle, slathering it with clotted cream whose richness purled like fresh snow, and a dollop of damson jam, its purple tartness a counterpoint to the honeyed depth. The circle leaned in, forks poised, the first bites eliciting sighs, Finch's a contented rumble, Croft's a clinical hum of approval. Craddock, accepting his scone with a nod that dipped his hat brim, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, the night's work. Textbook, if I may." Lydia Beaumont, remanded to Holloway till trial. Her confessions gold. The note luring Sir Reginald, the wrench from Finch's loan, return smeared, she says, in the manor's sink. The watch crushed under her disguised heel. Rags from Tom's shed indeed to forge the print. The necklace? Plucked post-blow to stage the thief. Motive pure avarice. Inheritance to fund her sculptor's schemes. The Frenchman with eyes on the purse, not the pedestal. Maids corroborated the novel in bed till 11, but the path's mud on her slippers, silk-stained, a tar faint, sealed it. Case closed thanks to your tapestry. Miss Marple inclined her head, sipping her tea. Plain, with lemon's mainsail. "My wrench. Cursed the day I fixed that boiler. Lent it cheerful, thinking publican's aid for the doc's favor. But the chit, eyes like a fox in the henhouse, all Paris polish and pinched smiles, owed me nought but a headache, and a new tool, mark ye. But justice, sweeter than this jam, and twice as sticky." He chuckled, a boom tempered to rumble, and raised his ale flask in salute, the foam cresting like a wave on a calm sea. "To Miss Marple, unravels knots tighter in a hangman's noose." Thorne his scone nibbled to architectural precision, crumbs arrayed like fallen leaves on his saucer, set down his cup with a clink solemn as a chalice. "Knots of the soul, Mr. Finch. Sin's Gordian tangle. My button. Pride's bauble. Planted in fog's folly to divert from my midnight mend. Oiled the gears myself, gloves askew, thinking sanctity's labor. But murder? The Almighty stayed my hand, though words with Sir Reginald scorched like brimstone over bells and baubles. Lydia's path, a parable of avarice as in Proverbs, the love of money root of all evil. Yet mercy tempers, as this tea soothes. Your insights, Miss Marple, divine as discernment." Croft, her scone dispatched with surgical efficiency, jam licked from thumb like a lancet swab, leaned back, spectacles glinting like facets of quartz. Parables and proverbs, fine for pulpit's vicar, but facts forge the fix. My wrench's wanderings, borrowed in good faith, returned a ghost. The will's slight, professional pique not poison, clinic dreams deferred, but not drowned in blood. Lydia's diagnosis, acute avarice, chronic delusion. Saw the signs in her consults, pulse racing at inheritance queries, eyes dilating like belladonna, But the path? My brookside jaunt that night. Liniment for Mrs. Archer's lumbago, steps brisk but blameless. Moonlight's a fine illuminant. You wield it like a speculum, Miss Marple. Reveal with her thermos, dispensing one more drop, loves, for the heart's ease. Her own eyes misty as damson mist. Craddock, scone vanquished, flipped his notebook shut with finality snap. Threads tied, ma'am, your pattern impeccable. The Frenchman's en route from Calais. Ease the key to the overseas angle. But here, peace, like you say. Miss Marple, her own scone a memory of flaky bliss and tart sweet contrast, set down her cup. The dregs forming a leaf whirl she read as harmony, and folded her hands, knitting needles idle, but ever ready in her lap. Peace, indeed, like the phases of the moon, wax to full, wane to wisdom. Lydia's greed hidden behind tears and taffeta was the eclipse, the shadow that darkened our square. But clues like constellations guided true, the mismatched midnight, the shadow path's whisper, the borrowed bludgeon's trail, the disguised tread, the staged sparkle. Human nature. It's the constant in every village, every heart. Predictable as dawn after dark, comforting in its constancy. We mend, we brew, we forgive. To St. Mary Mead, may its bells ever ring clear. The circle raised cups and flasks in unison, the clink a chime of closure, laughter bubbling like the tea's steam. Finch's guffaw, Croft's dry wit, Thorn's pious chuckle, Tom's earthy rumble. Sunlight slanted higher, gilding the casement, and as they rose, promises of harvest suppers, clinic fundraisers, bell repairs. The parlor emptied to the garden's embrace, voices trailing like autumn leaves in a kindly gale. Miss Marple lingered at the window, watching their figures recede. Thorn to his vestry, Croft to her calls, Finch to his pumps, Tom to his hedges, shadows no longer, but silhouettes in light. Emily cleared the tray, humming a snatch of green sleeves, and Miss Marple resumed her knitting, the shawl's cables twisting like resolved riddles, needles clicking a rhythm as steady as the bell's peal. The village